One peaceful evening, Oliver was shunting ballast trucks in the yards at Alsberg, feeling pleased with himself. He had had a good day, and was looking forward to topping it off with some leisurely shunting, as well as a chat with the small railway engines. As he pushed the trucks into a siding, he heard a voice call out to him.
"Say, Oliver, what are those things?"
Oliver recognised the voice as coming from Rex. He looked over to see him near the ballast chute.
"What things?"
He asked.
"Behind the trees, on that siding."
Curious, Oliver was uncoupled and puffed over to Rex to see what he was referring to. The siding in question was behind some bushes, and on it was a set of very strange objects. From a distance, Oliver couldn't quite make out what he saw on the siding. They looked like a line of large, dirty trucks. Naturally, Oliver's driver moved him across the yard so they could get a better look. When they stopped next to the siding, they stared in surprise. The objects weren't trucks. Instead, they were 6 old, rusty tenders.
"Blimey,"
exclaimed Oliver.
"where did these come from?"
I have no idea, replied the driver. We'll definitely tell the Fat Controller about this tomorrow. Perhaps he'll find some use for them. The next day came, and the Fat Controller arrived to examine the tenders, along with some workmen. Oliver watched closely, and was a little confused.
"Not sure what he did use for those things,"
he thought. Eventually, the Fat Controller turned and walked up to Oliver. A very fascinating find, Oliver, he said. It's clear these tenders have seen better days, but I think I know what to do with them. I'll have Henry take them to the works. And so it was arranged. Soon the tenders were coupled to Henry's goods train, and he puffed along the main line, unhappy with the extra, embarrassing weight. It turned out the tenders were the same ones Duck once used to play a trick on him when he felt he deserved a second tender. Everyone he passed made some sort of remark about washouts or Flying Scotsman's first visit. Henry felt a strong sense of relief when he finally arrived at the works. Duck was also there and had just been repainted. He looked cheekily over at Henry as he pulled in next to him.
"Hello, Henry.
He grinned.
I see you finally took a liking to those tenders."
"Don't you start too, Duck.
Groaned Henry.
And for your information, I'm not keeping them. The Fat Controller is going to start using these as replacement tenders for when our regular ones need to be mended."
Duck fell silent and made a frown. Henry noticed this immediately.
What?
Oh, never mind. It's just a myth I heard from the diesel I got these from.
Henry was confused.
What diesel?
A few days after I came to Sodor, I pulled a goods train to the station on the mainland. There, I offered to take those tenders from a diesel's goods train. But he warned me that they were, well, allegedly haunted.
Henry stared at Duck. Then he started to laugh. And soon Duck did too.
You don't really believe that, do you?
Said Henry, catching his breath.
No, as I said, it's only a myth.
But as Henry left to continue his goods run, the Western engine looked back at the tenders with a look of concern.
Well, I hope it is, for all our sakes.
A few days passed, and the tenders were all cleaned, refurbished, and repainted in various northwestern colours. They were now ready for a new engine to clean. Not long afterwards, James had to get a leak in his tender patched, and he was coupled up to one of the new tenders. James hated the one he was given. While it was thankfully his colour, taller than Gordon and dwarfed him.
It makes me look like a turtle carrying a rhinoceros on its back.
He complained to the others that evening.
I hear that's what Thomas said when he saw it.
Chuckled Gordon.
I only wish you was wrong.
Never mind, James.
Soothed Henry.
It's only temporary.
James sighed and went grumpily to sleep. The next morning, the Fat Controller came to speak to his engines. A train of supplies for workmen will be heading to Normanby, so the branch line there can have another set of tracks put in, he informed everyone. I will need an engine to take the trucks and the workmen's coach. Do I have a volunteer?
May I do it, sir?
Peeped James excitedly. There was a long, awkward silence. No one knew what to say. Everyone who knew James knew how much he despised filling trucks. So it would take a dream situation for him to be so willing to pull them, even though he didn't have to. Even the Fat Controller couldn't believe it, but he tried to compose himself. Yes, of course, James, he said at last.
Thank you.
Whistled James, and he puffed cheerfully out of the shed, leaving a set of baffled engines behind.
That's simply not like him.
Henry said to Gordon.
Why was he so quick to agree?
I don't know. Maybe he took on some contaminated coal.
Grunted Gordon. Unbeknownst to them, Duck had been listening from a siding.
Oh dear, maybe the story is true.
During the next few days, James seemed more and more unfazed by goods traffic, or even getting his paint dirty. While the other engines agreed this was a much-needed change for the better, the fact it was so sudden was undeniably unusual. A few days later, Donald and Douglas also had to have their tenders checked on. And they were both given different tenders. Donald's was larger than him, like James's was. Douglas was smaller.
Oh, not you two.
Said Henry when he saw them. The engines found it a great joke, but none of them realized that that was going to change very quickly. The next morning, Henry awoke to find Donald seething with anger while his driver tried to start him up.
What's wrong?
He called out. Donald exclaimed. Rubbish, Donald, replied his driver firmly. You're a goods engine. Now come on. Donald scowled at his driver, but reluctantly went on, leaving Henry very confused.
First James, and now Donald. What's this going on?
Donald was very violent and abusive to the truck, even when thanking. As for Douglas, he was different too, as Henry found out later that day at Tidmouth.
What was that?
Asked Douglas in alarm, as he heard some trucks bumping into each other.
Calm down, Douglas.
Puffed Henry.
It's only Dirk. Douglas, do you know why Donald and James are acting so strange lately? And for that matter, what's up with you? I didn't think an engine shunting would alarm you like that.
Sorry about that. I've always been nervous.
Said Douglas simply.
I'm just not used to noises as loud as all the own stuff being bumped together.
Henry was baffled, but before he could question Douglas further, the Scottish engine had to leave with another goods train. As he left, Henry watched on, unsure what to think. James's sudden change was at least a positive one, but as for the Scottish twins, they felt like completely different engines, and not in a good way. Henry then saw Duck at the far end of the yard, puffing away, and he couldn't help but notice a worried look on the other engine's face. Henry thought back to when he first brought the tenders to the works, and how Duck reacted. He then remembered what he said about them and where he got them from.
I wonder. Might be hiding something here.
Henry never got the chance to question Duck, and by the time night came, he was exhausted. He decided to leave it until tomorrow. He backed into the shed next to Gordon. James and the twins were also there, already fast asleep. Henry soon followed. It had begun to rain outside, and the sound was very soothing to the green engine. He definitely needed it.
Get away!
Henry and Gordon awoke in shock. The voice that just yelled was unmistakable.
James?
Gordon said.
What's the matter with you?
James didn't respond. He just kept rumbling in anger.
Get out of me!
He demanded, as if to no one in particular.
James?
Called Henry, but before he could say any more, Donald and Douglas woke up as well, and like James, began to shout and scream. It sounded like they were possessed.
Let me be! What are you in my snowbox for?
The once peaceful rain began to strengthen, and they could all hear thunder above them. Suddenly, there were multiple flashes of lightning, lighting up the entire shed. In those brief moments, the answers to Henry and Gordon's questions were revealed. In the flashes, they didn't see James and the twins. Instead, they could see 3 unfamiliar engines in their places. It was hard to get a good look at them, but when seeing them next to their tenders, they looked as if they were built to match. Then, the lightning stopped, and in the darkness, the 2 beginners could see that James, Donald, and Douglas were back in their places. They had also stopped screaming and had gone deathly silent. Gordon and Henry had never been in greater shock.
How?
The tenders.
Whispered Henry shakily.
They must have taken control of them somehow, but that wasn't right.
But that makes no sense, Henry. How can tenders be capable of something like that?
Henry didn't know how to respond at first. Gordon did have a point. Then, it came to him.